First, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey back in Boston, having just visited New Bedford. Tell me, your new budget is out, your proposal, $55.5 billion. What's in it for the South Coast, New Bedford, Fall River, and those suburbs to the north of 195 and to the south along the shoreline? What do you have for them?
Well, I think a lot. The first thing we have is housing, investments in housing. We know that people can't afford housing on the South Coast and, around the region. And so this really makes huge investments in increasing housing production around the state, including on the South Coast. The other thing is huge investments in climate. I was down in New Bedford the other day visiting the marine terminal. Yep. This can be the country's epicenter for offshore wind. That's what we want it to be. Huge opportunity for great green jobs, great chance to grow an important sector of our economy. So huge investments there, more than tripled the budget for our Clean Energy Center. And finally, a lot of investments in workforce. That includes investments in some of our higher ed institutions. We've got to grow our workforce. There are so many employers right now looking for workers. We've got to get folks trained up quickly for jobs, great paying jobs that are available.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about climate emergency, separate from the green energy, the windmills that you're talking about, developing offshore wind agency. Where do you get your knowledge about climate control? Who briefs you and who guides you on this?
We get it from the scientists, we really do, and from folks in our Energy and Environmental Affairs Agency. I also have a climate chief. We're paying close attention to this. Also, frankly, listening and talking to folks on the grounds. I mean, so many communities right now are struggling with beach erosion, rising seas, real struggles with resilience and sustainability. And, part of the investments that we need to make as a state are investments to plan for and account for some of the impact that climate is having on our environment, which in turn means our economy and people's way of life. And so, the good news here is that this is an opportunity to grow a sector of the economy. A lot of the technology that is going to power us away from fossil fuels to renewables, which ultimately will be less expensive. A lot of that technology is being developed right here in this region and in Massachusetts in particular.
Now, that particular region, they often complain that they're forgotten by Boston. When you say Mayor Mitchell and you say goodbye, does he say, "Don't forget about us"? Have you heard that before? What's the truth about that? And are you going to step up efforts to make sure that the South Coast is paid attention to under your administration? What have you heard and what's the plan?
Absolutely. And I can tell you, as governor, I am aware that has been the complaint historically, that, governors are folks in power. They think about Boston, they think about greater Boston, but they don't pay attention to enough of the rest of the state. That's not the kind of governor that I'm going to be or the lieutenant governor are going to be. We understand, are committed to all regions of the state. When I think about the South Coast, Gene, I was visiting the South Coast, I think 2 or 3 days after I was sworn into office. I was back in New Bedford the other day, spent a lot of time on the South Coast, love the region, and there's a lot of opportunity, but we're not going to get to where we need to be unless there's true state partnership and state commitment, and that includes the commitments that I've made in my budget.
Do you envision a real commitment to make sure that rail connection is made from the South Coast up to Boston? I've been talking about that for years.
Absolutely. And I have been committed to it for years. I think that is a really important thing. We've got to make sure we have great public transit around the state, including to and from the South Coast.
Now, you were the Attorney General for many, many years. Are you concerned about what's going on with SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank? You had branches in Metro Boston. There's talk that other banks may be going the same direction. What do you know about that as of today? And who do you want to hold responsible?
Well, I think this is really important as a matter of our economy. In Massachusetts, SVB, as you know, had locations here in Massachusetts. A lot of investors are venture capital folks, also life sciences, technology. Also, a lot of our nonprofits, housing developers also had deposits there. Here's the good news. Fed stepped in, and brought some order to the situation. People have had their deposits protected. But I think, one of the things I really want to stress is we've got great regional banks. Our core banking is so sound, and people should not have any concern about that. as a state, I asked my team to lean in over the last weekend and make sure we were connecting with investors, connecting with the banks, our regional banks, and letting them know how supportive we are of them. And we're just going to continue to monitor this, but I really want to encourage people to believe in the strength of our regional banks. It's very safe to keep your money there. Keep your money there, and trust the system. Unfortunately, it was a situation that this particular bank ran into trouble. I think they mismanaged some of their risk, and as a result, you saw what happened. But I think I've talked directly with the Biden administration about this. I've talked with members of our federal delegation, and I think that people do have a handle on this now.
What story should I believe, or what version of events should I believe? Senator Warren's, who says there was lack of deregulation under the Trump administration, or is it simply a matter that the bank bought too many bonds and inflation killed the bond rate and they fell apart? What's the correct story?
I think personally both are true. I think that this bank was allowed to play by a different set of rules under the former administration. There was a push to let that happen, so they weren't as well regulated, and they were allowed to take on more risk. And in this instance, they did take on more risk, considerable risk, and they didn't account for what might happen in terms of what the Fed might do around inflation. So I think it's a little bit of both, frankly.
All right, let's go back to transportation for just a second. The MBTA is a mess. We read that every day, and you're looking for a new person to run the MBTA. You're also looking for someone to run the state police. And I read a quote in a previous interview that you are proud that you have one of the most diverse cabinets. Who will fill those two positions? Is it going to continue with diversification, or will the best person get the job?
Best person is going to get the job. Which is always the case, including in my cabinet. I'm proud of those appointments because I believe that every secretary that I have appointed to this administration has been the best person for the job. Obviously, two important positions, state police colonel and general manager of RT. But again, we're looking to appoint the best person possible. With regard to the T, was it mistake in hindsight to go with a Chinese manufacturer of those rail cars that you've had so many problems with, or at least a Chinese parent company that owns the manufacturer here domestically? Well, that deal was made, well over 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I'm sure at the time people thought it was the best deal to make. Unfortunately, things changed in later years, and including in the global markets, including around some of the rules, the imposition of a tariff. It really changed the game a little bit. But here's what we've done. We've identified this, my administration has, as a problem and one we need to fix. And it's why I've put teams on the ground out in Springfield at that plant to make sure that we are doing everything we can to expedite the production of those trains. We've got to get those trains built quickly. We desperately need them for the infrastructure. And when it comes to the T generally and transportation generally, not only do we need a general manager, who I'm going to appoint, we're also going to appoint a transportation safety chief. We've never had that before at the agency, so that's going to happen. And we're going to look to fill the hundreds of jobs that have been left open for well over a year now. We have such a need for people to do the maintenance, to drive the buses, to do the dispatches, operators of our subways and the like. So, we've got our hands full. But we inherited, unfortunately, a real challenging situation there. But we are doing everything we can to bring the resources to it. Governor, just about a minute left. Let's hit a couple of quick issues. I got a lightning round. Was it the right thing to do to legalize marijuana? You were in law enforcement. A lot of law enforcement agencies remain against that. But it's legal. It's legal in your state. It's legal in Rhode Island. Is that the right direction? I think it's the right direction. And I say that as somebody who opposed it years ago as Attorney General. I was really concerned about what effect it might have on our young people and would they get addicted and the like. And so that's where I was coming from. Yep. But at this point, looking back, I think it was the right thing to do. I think it's an industry we want to continue to look at, right, and make sure that things are being done the right way. But I think it was the right thing to do. How about happy hour? I understand that's still pending. You don't have one. Would you like to allow that? I'm going to leave that one for the legislature right now. I've got my hands full with other things. I think they'll take a look at that, and we'll see what judgments they make. And finally, sports betting. Are you pleased with the way things are going so far? Looks like it's really gone off well. We've opened sports betting now, and my hope as governor is that this is an industry that helps generate a lot of revenue for the state.
Governor, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Gene. Thanks for having me.